Welcome, everybody. It is a pleasure to see all of you. We are here for another series of the content of their character. And as we have been doing each month since we began, we've been taking another theme and virtue within interpersonal relationships in Judaism and looking at how that impacts our lives today, how we can inculcate those qualities and traits within our personalities and our practice. We are here with a new month. We are the month of February 2023, and I would like to turn our attention to the subject of hospitality and welcoming guests. Hospitality and welcoming guests. And as a way of framing this idea, I would like to first begin with a story that I think will be a nice way of framing the conversation, framing the thoughts and ideas that we have, and that will allow us to jump immediately into our sources. So I'd like you to picture the following. We'll take a generic name, David. David has traveled to the East in search of enlightenment. He has spent many years training in Vipassana meditation from Tibetan masters. This sounds like the beginning of a joke, right? And now, this is half said in jest, and by the instruction of his teachers, he will go into the mountains with the smallest amount of food and water and begin a 5-day solitary meditation retreat. His goal is to reach a complete state of transcendence of the body. He will not even have enough food for day 5. He will touch on spiritual nirvana, and all is going extremely well. That is until the end of day 4. Just when he is about to enter his 5th and final day, the day where he will reach the peak spiritual experience, when the silence is rudely interrupted. And it is another character, we'll call him Joshua, who has also searched for adventure and traveled to the East. But unfortunately, his adventure has gotten totally out of hand. He has misplaced his Tibetan map on his 5-day solo hike. He's lost, completely hopeless, ran out of food and water, hungry, starving, exhausted, but suddenly ecstatic when he bumps into another human being. And Joshua shatters David's pristine silence and meditation and spirituality with the words, "Hey, how you doing? You wouldn't happen to have a Snickers bar on you by any chance, would you?" And David thinks to himself, a Snickers bar? A Snickers bar? Can't this idiot see that I'm meditating? I'm about to achieve the greatest moment of transcendence. He wants a Snickers bar? And that's the end of our story. I'm going to pause it there, believe it or not, because I want you to hold that in mind. And I'm not even going to go any further. Was he right? Was he wrong? Let's take a look at one of the most important and most powerful stories in the entire Torah. I want to go to chapter of 18 of Bereshit. Can you see my screen? Chapter 18, Bereshit. We have the story of Avraham Avinu. Avraham, our father, and he is sitting outside his tent in the heat of the day. You remember this story? Of course you do. This is a very powerful and very important story. And the one piece of background information I need to give you, in case you're not familiar with this story, is that Avraham has just had his Brit Milah. He's just had his circumcision. At age, who remembers? What age is Avraham when he has his circumcision? 99. Correct. Avraham is 99 years old, and God says to him, I want to enter into a covenant with you. That's the word Brit. The word Brit means a pact, a covenant, a promise, a relationship between two parties, between two partners. And God says to Avraham, I want to enter into a Brit with you, and I will make 2 promises to you. I will give you the land, and I will give you children. Those are God's 2 promises to Avraham. I will give you the land, and I will give you children. And the sign of the Brit is Brit Milah, is circumcision. Fine. This is our background. Avraham is recovering from his Brit Milah. It's day 3. Day 3 traditionally is the most painful day of recovery after the circumcision. Okay? You now know everything that you need to know for us to begin. So without any further to do, let us jump in. V'ya elav Hashem be'elanei mamre, v'hu yashev petach ha'ochel kachom hayom. God appeared to him, the him is Avraham, God appeared to Avraham in the plains of Mamre. This plains is an Old English word that means flat lands, an expanse of earth. Of Mamre, this is just the name associated with this area. In the plains of Mamre, while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Okay, now there's a couple of questions here. Before we get into the mitzvah of extending hospitality to guests, I just want to have a careful, close read because it really is worthwhile and it's important for the purposes of this passage. So he's sitting at the entrance of his tent. I just informed you that he was recovering from his Brit Milah, and it was the 3rd day of his Brit Milah, which is the most painful period of time. Why is he not in bed? Why is he not recovering? Why is he at the entrance of his tent? Any answers? Any takers? What do you think? Unmute yourselves and tell me, why is Avraham sitting at the entrance of his tent? Anybody? The reason, yes, Ora?
Yeah, he might be looking for passers-by to invite them into his tent.
Excellent. So passionate was Avraham. And by the way, this needs to be said as the forerunner of our people, as the prototype of our nation, as the first Jew, together with his wife Sarah, of course. His passion, his love, his whole life was defined, one could almost say, by chesed, by loving kindness, by a sense of altruistic generosity to others. And here is Avraham in pain, sitting at the entrance of his tent because he wants to offer hospitality to guests. Very simple, yet very powerful. He wants to offer hospitality to guests. So he's not sitting up in bed. He is not putting his feet up. He's not resting. He's not taking it easy. He's looking to help, even despite his pain. Now, I want to delve just a little bit. I'm going to scratch the surface. Hopefully, I'm going to leave you with more questions than answers in this introductory few minutes. But God, knowing that Avraham is so kind and so generous and so desirous of hospitality, knows that, oh my God, the last thing this guy needs as he's recovering in bed are strangers walking by. You only know what's going to happen then. He's probably going to run and greet them and offer them a cup of tea and some coffee and tea and lunch. So I'm going to artificially turn up the thermostat, and it's going to be such a hot baking day that no travelers would possibly be outside. That is what it means when it says that he was sitting at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. Did you notice that expression? In the heat of the day. I mean, who cares what temperature it was? It was Israel. It's usually hot in Israel. You have to find, a cold, wintry night in February to have the rains. But it's usually hot. The Torah is telling us the weather. The Torah doesn't care about the weather. The Torah is more than a book of chit-chat and simple conversation. So if it tells us that he was doing this in the heat of the day, there must be more to it than that. And amazingly, the Midrash notes, as I just shared with you, God artificially makes it a hot day so no one is out there. However, there's another Midrash, there's another rabbinic legend that says the following. God then looks out at Avraham and he's like, oh my God, he probably doesn't say, oh my God, but he's like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Even though I made it scorchingly hot, this guy is still looking for people to entertain. And no one's out there today because it's boiling. And now He's uncomfortable about the fact, not only is he recovering from his circumcision, but he's uncomfortable about the fact that he can't entertain guests. I got to do something for this man. He's unbelievable. I'm going to artificially send him 3 people just so that he can be assuaged because he loves entertaining so much. And that's how Avraham finds 3 people passing by. Now, I want to just scratch the surface here because I shared 2 rabbinic commentaries with you. What's really interesting is that on each occasion, it's almost as if God hasn't thought it through properly. Because what does God say? You know what? He's recovering. The last thing I want is for him to be troubled with guests. I'm going to make it so hot. And he does. But that leaves still a lot more to be answered up, because what? God doesn't understand that Abraham is then still going to be troubled? God didn't realize he's still going to be sitting outside? It's weird. It's like God didn't think it through to its conclusion. So then God has to artificially manipulate that 3 people should walk by because he realizes that Abraham so desperately wants guests. He didn't realize this in the first place. Just keep the temperature down and he could have had his guests ordinarily. So there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. I'm not going to answer this up because our class today is not a Torah class. Although next Monday I will be starting a Torah class on Abraham. There's a little plug. In person at the Shah, Monday evening, 7 p.m. So I'm not going to answer this now, but I want you to realize that there's more than meets the eye. Let's keep going. He saw them. Sorry, he lifted his eyes. My goodness, we've done 1 line. We better get a move on. This class is going to be an 8-hour class otherwise. And I know Vivian is here. She would be happy with an 8-hour class. That's fine. I know some of you would be okay with that. So he lifted his eyes, and there were 3 men standing before him. He saw them and ran to greet them from the entrance to the tent and bowed toward the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes, please do not leave your servant." Stop there. Stop there for a moment. He said, "My Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes, please do not leave your servant." Can you tell me who's he speaking to in that line that I have highlighted? Unmute yourselves. Who is Abraham speaking to in that line, please? Yes, anybody?
To God?
He's speaking to God. Why would you say that, Vivian?
Because God granted him with guests, and he's asking him like to be strong enough to receive the guests. That's what I understand.
Interesting. Let me be strong enough to receive these guests.
Because it's in the singular.
Okay.
It's in the singular, my Lord,
Very
not my
interesting.
lords.
Very interesting. My Lord. So he's speaking. You also, Ora, think like Vivian that he's speaking to God?
Yes.
My Lord, if I have found favor. Now, that is excellent. Vivian, Ora, excellent points. However, I would like to show you a weakness with that interpretation. Okay? I want to show you a weakness because let's go back to the beginning. God appeared to him in the plains of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to the tent, and he lifted his eyes, and there were 3 men standing before him. And then he saw them, he ran to greet them, and he bowed down to the ground, and then he said, "My Lord, if I found favor." If that line is Abraham speaking to God, then shouldn't this part, shouldn't that be over there? If he's having a communication with God, and then he sees people, shouldn't at that point he says, "You know what? If I've found favor in your eyes, please don't leave your servant." It's almost as if he's saying, "God, we're having a conversation. You've appeared to me, but I see that there's other people coming towards me. Can you just stay here for a moment excuse me, can you stay here for a moment? Don't leave me. I'll be right back. That was how you interpreted the passage. The only weakness with that passage is, shouldn't he have said that to God before he runs off and greets the other people? Do you see how that is a limitation of your interpretation? Yes, are you with me? Did I lose everybody with that? You with me? You know, you're not so bothered by that, Vivian? Speak to me, Vivian. Speak to me, Vivian. You're not bothered by that? You're on mute. You're on mute, Vivian.
Yes, it could be that once he saw them, he realized how hard it would be, and he was still thankful, and he wants support. You know, once he bent down, it could be like hurting him, and he's at the same time and thankful and hoping he can do it. It's okay. I'd like to hear you and see how.
Okay, interesting. Someone else. Might Abraham be speaking to somebody else? He said, "My Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes, please do not leave your servant." Any other suggestions? Who's Abraham talking to, if it's not God?
The guests.
The three men, right?
Yeah.
And the interpretation would be much more simple. He saw them, he ran to greet them from the entrance of the tent, and he bowed toward the ground. And he said, "My Lord, if I found favor in your eyes, please don't leave your servant." In other words, stop. You're passing by. Stop. Come into my home. Let me, and you'll see in the next verse, I want to feed you. I want to feed you. So I think that's a much more simpler interpretation. It fits better in terms of the flow of the words. It fits much better. Any comments, any questions? Yes, Vivian, however.
Why not my lords? Because there were three men.
Fantastic. However, with this more simpler, as I'm claiming, at least in my reading of it, in this simpler reading, there's another problem, and that is he's speaking in the singular, my Lord. We were just told there's three of them. So if there's three of them, why is he now speaking in the singular, my Lord? Now, this isn't a devastating question, by the way. You could answer that up. What do you think the answer might be? Why is he speaking in the singular? What do you think the answer might be? Someone else. Yes, Lynn.
Is it possible that he's speaking to them as being one with God, so that he sees within them the God within them? So he says, "My Lord."
That is a very creative interpretation, but there's a simpler, and Lynn, true to form. I love your depth of spirituality. You dive straight into the deep end. You don't have to go that spiritual in your interpretation. There's a simple interpretation. If he is speaking to these three men, why is he speaking in a singular, my Lord? What might the interpretation be? Alice Lara, come on. You know the answer to this. Tell us.
Well, he's really speaking through them to God. He's
No.
He's recognizing
you're too religious. You're too religious.
Hey?
You're too religious. No, don't. Give me a simple.
Recognizing that there's or he's recognizing the leader.
Oh, bingo. Thank you. Why is Abraham speaking in the singular to these three people? Because he's only speaking to one person. He's speaking to the most important of them. He's speaking to the leader of them. And Abraham somehow or other was able to recognize that there was a seniority here among of these three. Fascinating. Would you like to know how this passage is read by the classical commentators? The words, my Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes, please do not leave your servant. Speaking to the three guests, that is the approach of the Ramban, Nachmanides. And he says, with the question against his interpretation, the weakness, but it's in the singular. It says, my Lord. How can you say in the singular, my Lord, when there's three of them? The Ramban claims Abraham was speaking to the most important of the three. Exactly Alice Lera's answer. Alice, the Ramban 800 years ago said what you just said now. That's amazing. That's incredible. However, that's not the only interpretation, because Ora and Vivian, who said that Abraham was speaking to God, that, my friends, is the interpretation given by Rashi. And Rashi's interpretation is a radical reading. And you need to realize how radical this is. You should be falling off your chairs. Because what is the implication of Rashi's reading? If you will say, this passage I have highlighted is Abraham speaking to God when three passers-by have interrupted God's communication with Abraham, then in other words, the interpretation is God appears to Abraham and Abraham says, I'm awfully sorry. Would you mind holding the line? I've just got call waiting. I need to go and take that. I'll be right back. Would you mind awfully? Just stay here. It's okay. I'll be moments. I'm just going to cook an entire full lunch and go out of my way to give the greatest hospitality in the history of the world. I'll just be a couple of minutes. Go back to the story with which I began. Go back to the story with which I began. Do you remember that person that was trying to reach the heights of spirituality by going into a Tibetan mountain to meditate and to meet God in a transcendental experience? And someone says, excuse me, have you got any food? That wasn't a simple story. That wasn't an analogy. That was Bereshit chapter 18. God is communicating in the deepest way possible with Avraham. And Avraham turns around and says to him, I need you to wait. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I need you to wait. In other words, if what Avraham is engaged in is an act of hospitality, as we're soon going to see, let me ask you the simplest of questions. What is of a greater hierarchical level in Judaism? Personal spirituality, communicating with God, or feeding strangers? I would like to answer that Judaism teaches a radical and absolutely astounding teaching in this opening few verses. And it is summarized in the language of the Talmud as follows. Greater is hospitality to guests than greeting the face of God. Isn't that amazing? Greater is hospitality to guests than greeting the face of God. I find that astounding. Yes, Lynn, you have your hand up.
Question / comment, and that would be that in theory, we're always greeting God. And that
say that again, we're always
greeting God. If you know what I mean, like
no, expand.
Okay. If we believe that the spark of God resides within all of us.
Yes.
So that a guest is one more is connecting with that spark of God.
Yes.
So that when would it not be the same, i.e., I'm talking to you, God, or these guests have appeared and I'm continuing to talk to you, God?
Yes. Yes.
Therefore, that's why it would be of greater importance at that moment, because it had just appeared.
Right. Right. There is godliness in all of us. But I don't want to read it in a spiritual sense, Lynn, and I'm on
Okay.
purpose not doing
I'm
it that
listening.
way, because I want to read this in a very ordinary sense, that there might be people hungry in front of you, and feeding the hungry is of a greater spirituality than the transcendence of meeting God in prayer or meditation.
And what I would be answering now is that not like b'chesed, b'rachamim, these are acts of compassion
Yes,
in the physical world.
yes. We're in agreement. Good.
Okay.
We're in
Okay.
agreement. Let's go further. Take some water and wash your feet and rest under the tree. I will fetch some bread and you will satiate yourselves, then go on, inasmuch as you have passed your servant's way. They said, do so, just as you have said. So Avraham hurried to the tent to his wife Sarah and said, hurry, 3 measures of fine flour, knead them and make cakes. Then Avraham ran to the cattle, to a good tender calf, and gave it to the youth, who hurried to prepare it. He took cream and milk, as well as the calf which he had prepared, and he placed these before them. He stood before them under the tree, and they ate. There's something really stunning here that we are witnessing, and that really is Avraham as an individual who is just never satisfied with his spiritual accomplishments. Avraham is longing to have guests at a time when he's recovering from one of the greatest of spiritual acts, from his circumcision. And yet you might think that Avraham might be patting himself on the back. You might think that this could be an incredible moment for Avraham, where he is basking in his growth. And yet he's not satisfied with that level of spirituality. He wants more. And he's longing for guests. And despite the fact that God is now communicating with him when this scene happens, when it enters, it's Avraham that asks God to wait so that he can attend to his guests. It's an exceptional idea. I want to share a story with you. I want to share a contemporary story with you. This is really, really powerful. It is a story told of Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, the Chafetz Chaim. We've spoken about him a number of times. He passed away in 1933. He lived in Eastern Europe, and he was known for his saintliness and his piety. He was also seen as the leading rabbi of European Jewry at the beginnings of the 1900s. But notwithstanding the fact that he was seen as the greatest rabbi of the generation, he was known even more so for his saintliness. And a story is told of a student who was traveling to visit him. He was visiting him, and he was coming in on a Friday. And by the time that he arrived, he was so tired. And the Chafetz Chaim, he was known as the Chafetz Chaim, even though his name was Yisrael Meir Kagan. He wrote a book called Chafetz Chaim. And in Judaism, you become known by the name of your popular books, okay? So that wasn't his name, the Chafetz Chaim, but that's just how he became known, the Chafetz Chaim. So the student was exhausted, and the Chafetz Chaim looked at him and he said, why don't you take a nap before Shabbat enters, before Shabbat prayers? And, there'll be a meal following Shabbat prayers, but can see you're tired, so go to bed. And the student said, thank you so much. I actually will take you up on your offer. And he went to bed. And when he woke up, he saw that it was dark and that he was totally embarrassed because he'd actually missed Friday night davening. He'd missed the tefillah. He'd missed the prayers in shul. And when he came out of his room and he was so, oh my God, I'm in front of like the greatest rabbi. And here I am, I've slept through Friday night prayers. I'm so embarrassed. He said, I'm sorry. And he's like, don't worry. We'll pray in the house. You can go ahead and pray in the house. I already prayed, but no problem. Why don't you go ahead and pray? And he went ahead and he prayed. And what ended up happening was after he prayed, he was surprised to see that the rabbi's wife had gone to sleep. She'd gone to bed already. He's like, that's strange. Why would she go to bed so early? And he asked the rabbi, why did your wife go to bed? He's like, oh, she was very tired. She went to retire early. And so the rabbi and the student sat down together at dinner, and they sang a song or two, and they shared words of Torah wisdom with each other. And after that, the rabbi went to sleep. And as the student was preparing to get into bed, he noticed that the clock on the wall struck 3 a.m. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's so weird. His clock's off. And then he realized, no, actually the clock is working. The clock is working. When he had arrived on Friday afternoon, exhausted, when the rabbi said, why don't you rest a little? He had slept all the way through until 2 a.m. Saturday morning. And as he slept, the rabbi had stayed up into the night and waited for him and was pretending that it was still early so that he could let the student rest and avoid any possibility of embarrassing him. And when the student woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, he made it out as if, oh, you've overslept a little bit. Yeah, you've missed synagogue, but you can just go ahead and pray. He thought maybe it's 6 o'clock in the evening and prayers are at 5 p.m. This is a totally different way of looking at what it means, a totally different way of looking at what it means to take welcoming guests seriously, to take that mitzvah of hachnasat orchim in Hebrew, of welcoming people into our homes in a totally serious and real way. Let's take a look at the questions or comments. Let's take a look at the next source. Here we have a very, very powerful verse from Devarim. And the Torah tells us that we are to follow God. The Lord your God shall you follow, and him shall you fear. Keep his commandments, listen to his voice, serve him, and cleave to him. That is an important phrase. And cleave to him. Now, we know that God doesn't have a body. We know that God is not corporeal. We know that God is not physical. What does it mean, cleave to God? Cleave to God? How is a person supposed to cleave to God? Lynn, that's a hand up? No, that's a stretch. Okay, so how is a person supposed to cleave to God? Take a look at the Talmud. This is taken in Sota 14a. The Talmud asks the question, how is a person supposed to cleave to God? Rabbi Chami bar Hanina said, what is the meaning of the verse, after the Lord your God shall you follow? Is it possible for a person to walk and follow and cleave to God? How are you supposed to cleave to God? You can't touch God. Rather, this teaches us to emulate God's attributes. Just as he clothes the naked, as it's written, and God made for Adam and his wife garments of skin, and he clothed them, so must you clothe the naked. Just as God visits the sick, where does God visit the sick? It's how we started our class today. God visits Abraham on the 3rd day after his Brit Milah. God appeared to him who was recovering from his circumcision in the plains of Mamre. So must you visit the sick. God comforts the mourners. Did you know that God comforts mourners? Look at this proof verse in the Talmud. It's stunning. God comforts mourners, as it's written. And it was after the death of Abraham that God blessed Yitzchak, his son, as comfort for the loss of his father. Fascinating. So too must you comfort mourners. Just as God buries the dead, who does God bury in the Torah? Who does God bury? None other than Moses. God buries Moses. Just as God buries the dead, so too shall you bury the dead. This is a beautiful passage of Talmud. It's one of my favorites, actually, because what it's teaching us is that God is ordinary. I know that you want to hear that God is great, that God is powerful, that God is overwhelming, is all-bearing, is all-knowing, is all-seeing. I can't relate to that type of God. You know what type of God I can relate to? I can relate to an ordinary God. Now, those things are all true. God is all-seeing. God is all-powerful. God is all-knowing. But you know what else God does? He visits the sick. God feeds the hungry. God clothes the naked. God buries the dead. Isn't that incredible? If you wanted to explain who God is, you'd probably go straight into a philosophy text, right? But that's not the way Judaism works. We don't know God through philosophy. We know God through his relationships with us. And what are those relationships? He feeds the hungry. He clothes the naked. He buries the dead. He comforts mourners. That's an incredible idea. It's an incredible God. Let's go a little further. Here we come to a commentary called the Shlah. He is a 17th century mystic. And look what he writes. Look what he writes in terms of what does it mean to entertain somebody through hospitality. This is fascinating. It is clear to me that besides for its status as a lofty moral attribute, the mitzvah of hospitality constitutes fulfillment of the mitzvah to walk in his ways, to emulate God. For the Holy One, blessed be he, extends hospitality to all his creatures who are guests in every period and epoch, at every second and every moment of every day. If not for God's hospitality at every moment, then all of existence would cease to exist. This means that all the inhabitants of the world are like guests of God. A person is like one who has come to lodge in this world for a time. We are visitors here, and God hosts us. Therefore, by acting as a host to others, one is directly emulating God and walking in his ways. Friends, this will change your life. That passage will change your life. Do you know where we are right now? We're in God's hotel. You think you might be sitting on the beach in Florida? You are wrong. And if you're not in Florida, boy, you are not in Florida. But even if you're in Florida right now, you're not in Florida. You know where you are? You are a guest in God's great world. And at every second of every moment of every single passage of time that ever was and that ever will be, God continually brings this world into existence. This is a mystical idea. I told you he was a Kabbalist, the Shla. He was a Kabbalist. By the way, that's also not his name either. As you know, that was one of his books. But here, you're learning so much today. Some people are no, we don't call anybody by their names. Not only do we know people by their books, but we even call people by the acronym of their books. So who was the Shla? The Shla wasn't even the Shla. The Shla was Shnei Luchot Habrit. The Shnei Luchot Habrit, which is the Hebrew for the 2 tablets of stone. The 2 tablets of stone. So he calls his book the 2 tablets of stone, the Shnei Luchot Habrit, and we don't even call him the Shnei Luchot Habrit. We just take the first letter, Shin Lamed Hey, and we call him the Shla. The Shla. Amazing. But the Shla was a Kabbalist and he was a mystic. And he says, do you know how great a mitzvah it is to host guests? There can be no greater following in God's ways than hosting a guest. Because what is God in his essence? God in his essence is a host. He's someone that allows others to come into his domain, to come into his habitat. And what is God's habitat? The world, the universe, existence itself. And who are the guests? You and I. And God's letting us step foot on planet Earth. Isn't that an amazing way of looking at this? It's fascinating. Totally, totally different. Yes, Ora, you want to say something?
Yes, I wonder if that's why Abraham is called a sojourner, like
A sojourner.
sojourner.
Yes. He didn't really believe that this was the real world. Fascinating. I'm just here temporarily. I'm passing through. This world, I'm a guest. It's not mine. I'm not in charge. I love that, Ora. I love that. That's fascinating. Thank you. I love that so much. You know, it just reminded me of another story of the Chofetz Chaim. Can I share another little anecdote about the Chofetz Chaim? Somebody came into the Chofetz Chaim's house and he saw that the house was bare. He had nothing. He had a table, tiny bookcase. You know, historians now say they're not even sure that the Chofetz Chaim had an entire set of the Talmud, if you can get your head around that. It just wasn't common in Eastern Europe that you would even own a whole set of the Talmud. He had a tiny bookcase, a bed. The bed was broken with only like 3 legs on it, a table to eat, and that was like his whole house. Someone said it. Now, someone walked in, and the person that walked in must have been from a different world, because he's like, I don't understand. You don't have any of the fridge magnets. Well, where are your fridge magnets? You're supposed to, you know, I climbed the great mountains of Washington and all of those like cheesy fridge magnets. You know, you stick on the fridge. It's like, where's your stuff? I don't understand. Where's your stuff? To which the Chofetz Chaim, sharp as a tack, said, where's your stuff? I don't understand. Where's your stuff? He's like, where's my stuff? What type of question is that? I'm just passing through. When you're passing through, you don't bring your stuff with you. The Chofetz Chaim said, I'm just passing through. And when you're passing through, you don't bring your stuff with you. Isn't that a stunning story? We're all just friends. It's frightening to think about it, but we're all just passing through. And at the end of the day, you don't get to take the toys that we have amassed with us. It's one thing and one thing only we get to take with us, and that's the Torah we have learnt and the kind deeds that we have performed. We've been fortunate enough to give tzedakah. Our merits will be there on the other side to meet us. But when we pass through, the car, the toys, whatever the toys are, we don't take them with us. Okay. Back to the matter at hand. We have to learn some Torah today. Okay. We have to learn. It's not. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep telling you stories the whole time, and you're going to complain that you don't learn any Torah with Rabbi Fishman. Okay. Another mitzvah. This is very, very important mitzvah, taken from Devarim, chapter 6, mitzvah 18. This is a very, very important mitzvah. Listen to the following. You must do. How are we doing for time? Oh my God. Okay, so we have a little bit of time left. Let's see what we can do. You must do what is fair and good in the eyes of God, so that it will be good for you. It's a very important verse. Va'asita hayasha v'hatov be'enei Hashem. You must do what is fair and good in the eyes of God. If I was to ask you, what does that mean? Before you look at Nachmanides, before you look at the Ramban, you must do what is right and just. You must do what is right and just. What does that mean? What do you think that means? By the way, this verse is in the Torah, where God has given us 613 mitzvot. And now God comes along and says, you must do what is right and just. What does that mean? You must do what is right and just. Any guesses? What does that mean? You must do what is right and just in the eyes of God. What would you think that means? Any guesses?
I would think that you have to try and figure out what God would think is right and just, or know from Torah, not what you personally think is right and just. You have to have determine the objective source of what is right and just.
Excellent. Excellent. It's not about you coming up with what you think is right and just, but what does God think is right and just? Plenty of suicide bombers that live in the world today that think they're doing exactly what is the right thing to do. What does God want? What does God think is the right thing to do? Okay, excellent. Another interpretation, please. What might it mean when God says in the Torah, do what is right and just? What do you think?
Keep the commandments.
Keep the commandments, but he already gave us the commandments. I need a commandment telling me to keep the commandments.
Oh.
You have to interpret according to what was given.
Okay, do the commandments
but-
according to the correct interpretation. Maybe that's what it means. Do what is right and just. Okay, someone else? Another interpretation? No one's hit the nail on the head yet. Someone else? What does it mean that God says, do what's right? Well, you just gave me all the commandments in the Torah. Now you're telling me do the right thing? So I'm supposed to do the commandments and I've done the wrong thing? Take a look at Nachmanides. He says something amazing. The Ramban. The intention behind this mitzvah is to do what is fair and good, is the following. You want to know what this means? It means the following. The verse is saying, even regarding matters in which I have not explicitly commanded you, make sure you do what is good and right in God's eyes, because he loves that which is good and right. It would be, this is an important principle, continues the Ramban. It would be impossible for the Torah to specify the proper interpersonal conduct for every life situation regarding neighbors, regarding friends, regarding business dealings, regarding communities, regarding country. How many mitzvot did we get? 613. Do you think contained in those 613 is every single answer to every single question of how should I act in the world? Of course not. We don't know how to act in the world. What are you supposed to do when someone shares on their Instagram account a picture of you and you didn't want them to share a picture of you on social media? What mitzvah are you supposed to look up in the Torah then? We don't know what God, how are we supposed to know how to behave by going to the Torah? We get rough ideas. We get a general picture. Okay, don't cook meat and milk together. Okay, put a mezuzah on your doorpost. Okay, give tzedakah to the poor. Those are general ideas. But to legislate for every sphere of interpersonal human life, thousands and thousands and thousands of case studies and scenarios and situations. The Torah could never do that. So it comes up, says the Ramban, with a catch-all. Put a mezuzah, don't cook meat and milk, give charity. And by the way, after doing all of these 613, do what is right and just. Even where we didn't legislate, do the right thing. Do the right thing. And this is an amazing thing because we all have that sense of wanting to be a good person. We all have that sense of wanting to do what's good. And actually, this is a valuable feeling in the eyes of the Torah. God asks us that we live a life that is fair and good in all situations. In all situations. But there's another reason why hospitality is so central. There's another reason why hospitality is so central in Jewish life. Let's finish with this. We have a couple of minutes. Let's finish with this. Pirkei Avot, chapter 3, verse 17. And the commentary of the Machzor Vitri. Commentary of the Machzor Vitri. Let's start with the Mishnah first. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, if there's no Torah study, there can be no proper conduct. And if there's no proper conduct, there can be no Torah study. This is a fabulous Mishnah. If there's no Torah study, you can't be a mensch. You can't be an upstanding, wholesome individual if you haven't learned the Torah. How are you going to know how to act? But if you're not a mensch, if there's no upstanding behavior, if you don't have positive character traits, then there can be no Torah study. Take a look at these two commentaries. If there is no proper conduct, there can be no Torah study. If a person is not already civilized and cultured enough to act properly towards others, then the Torah that he studies will not improve him. Furthermore, he will eventually forget what he studies. This is an amazing idea. If you are a lowly piece of work, studying Torah is not going to make you a better person. If you are a real no-goodnik, as they say, then studying Torah is not going to refine your character traits. And actually, any Torah you learn, you'll probably forget. One last commentary, Kahati. This is a contemporary of the 20th century. Kahati, 20th century. If a person lacks derech eretz, one who does not have good character traits and does not represent the epitome of interpersonal conduct, lacks Torah, in the sense that his Torah study has no value. And his very conduct degrades the majesty of the Torah. Fascinating. If you don't have proper character traits, if you are unable to appropriately conduct yourself in this world, then you don't really have Torah, because any Torah that you have, people are going to look at it and they're just going to devalue it. It's not going to be worth much. So hospitality, seen in this final perspective, almost becomes an expression of a person's humanity. If you can't open your house, if you can't open your door, if you can't feed the needy, if you can't feed the hungry, if you have no sense of largesse, if you have no sense of being able to give and share, then in the deepest way, you have no connection to Torah. You have no connection to our values, our virtues, because your own interpersonal life shows that you don't really care about what God cares about. It's a fascinating idea. And these are the reasons that hospitality, taken collectively, are the cornerstone, are the bedrock of Judaism. It becomes not just the trait of Abraham, but it becomes the trait of what it means to be a Jew in the deepest way. to have a love for other human beings, to have sensitivity to the needs of other human beings. Only such a person is able to really represent the Torah. Only such a person is really able to touch on what it means to walk in God's ways and to have those moments of spirituality.
Rabbi, doesn't it become a bit of a, which comes first, the chicken or the egg in a person like that? Like, you know, if a person on his own.
It does. And that's why we have a definitive final answer from a different source in the Talmud. And the Talmud says, menschlichkeit and manners come first.
Mhm.
In the language of the Talmud, derech eretz kadma la-Torah.
Yeah.
Derech eretz, proper human behavior, appropriateness, upstandingness, uprightness, being a mensch, being a decent human being, that is prior to the Torah. And the source for that statement of our sages is the fact that the Torah is only given in the middle of the second book of the Torah.
Wasn't that argument settled with the wise guy who approached Hillel and said, teach me the whole Torah standing on one foot? And he said, love your neighbor as yourself. Now go and learn.
Very nice.
So,
Very nice. What's the Torah? Loving of one's neighbor. That's where we begin. That's where we begin. Very, very, very nice, Stephen. So we have, yes, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. You're very, oh, Lewis, yes.
Rabbi Akiva said, not love your neighbor as yourself. I thought he lowered it a little bit, and he said, don't do to your neighbor what you wouldn't want done to yourself.
Yes, that is also correct. That is also correct. It's beautiful. On my screen, Stephen and Lewis are the next squares next to each other. So we have Hillel and Rabbi Akiva both being represented. This is amazing. I'm waiting for one of you to jump into the other square of the other one. You're right.
And I just want to say one other thing. We talk about 613 mitzvah. 613 mitzvah. For 1,000 years, Judaism was very temple-centric.
Yes.
And it was really reinvented, rabbinic Judaism. And the great majority of the 613 are superfluous now because it's related to the temple.
Yes.
So there's it's very misleading to talk about 613 mitzvot.
You're right. You're right. Practically today, someone did a count. I think it's around 200 that are only, I think there's only 200. But don't worry, we've still got enough work. Our work's cut out for us. Yes, there was another lady who wanted, yes, I don't know your name. You're on mute. Unmute yourself and share your name with me, please.
Hi, I'm Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. Are we not allowing for people to change?
We are always, absolutely. That is 100% part of this. What we're saying is that if you're a bore, if you're an absolute slob, if you have no common decency, then it's going to be extremely hard for you to inculcate virtues into your life. But of course, people change. Of course, yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, undoubtedly. Okay. Wow. Amazing. What a great start. Friends, as always, I'm just dropping a few breadcrumbs. If you've been learning with me now for a few months, you know how it works. Class 1 is a gentle introduction, but now we're going to go deeper, okay? And we're going to go deeper, and we're going to go deeper. So I'm looking forward to a fantastic series this February, welcoming guests and hospitality, and we're going to see just how far this leads us, please God. Have a great day, and let me finish by saying that tonight, tomorrow, hang on, I have it here. Hopefully you've all received this by now. Hopefully you've had this in the mail, and I can share with you that tonight in person is Dr. Menachem Rothstein, who's giving a 4-part series on modern Hebrew literature from the great Hebrew literature personalities of the 20th century. If you're interested in that, that's 7 p.m. at the Shah. In person tonight. Tomorrow night at 8 p.m. is Rabbi Ariel Rakovsky, who is brilliant. Okay, he's brilliant, and he's a good friend of mine. This is on Zoom. This is on Zoom at 8 p.m. And he will be delivering a series called Bold, Brilliant, and Banned. Some of the greatest Jewish works that were banned by the Jewish community because they didn't appreciate them at the time when they were published, and they thought they were dangerous. Fascinating series. Okay, this is tomorrow night. Tonight in person is Hebrew literature, and tomorrow night online is Rabbi Aryeh Rakovsky with banned brilliant books. Okay, thank you everybody. Great to see you. Great to learn together with you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you. As always,
Thank you,
every
Rabbi.
Tuesday at 12 noon. Every Tuesday, 12 noon. All the best, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.